Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features X-Men, that is X-Men Volume 2, issue number 31, cover dated April 1994. So the cover caption here, Revelations, the image by Andy Kubert, pencils, Matthew Ryan, inks, and coming on board, Lovern Kindersky, the digital colorist of this cover. And in the background we have in deep shadow the figure of Spiral, last seen in X-Book Continuity in X-Factor Annual number 7. And in the foreground there we have the mystery of who is the real Psylocke. So we've got Revanche on one side and we've got Psylocke over here, Kwannon and Betsy Braddock. Who's who, what's their relationship? All of this goes back to Fabian Nicieza's retconning of Psylocke's emergence from the Siege Perilous and her transformation into the Asian version of herself in issues 20 to 23 of X-Men. You'll find those reviews online. So let's open this one up to the first page. And what we have here, as it turns out, is a flashback. And the title of the story is Soul Possessions. And we're in Japan again, in Tokyo, and there is a voiceover. Somebody's asking, a Tehran city, isn't it? Yes, it's called Tokyo. A current time scan? No, it's a flashback several solar cycles ago, so several years ago. And this speaker says, I accessed the memory logs of a Tehran female named Kwannon, an assassin by trade. Really? And what is she by nature? That is a question to which, to this day, no one seems to have the answer. So that's what's going to be explored in this issue and indeed in the next, as Fabian Nicieza returns to this storyline, he himself set in train, and tries to deal with a continuity snafu where he apparently, although he read issue 256 of Uncanny X-Men, he didn't read 255, and I talk about that in my review of X-Men number 22. Which you'll find here on the channel. So it turns out that one of the people speaking over this a relay of events from the past is Spiral here, also once again in deep shadow. And in the background we have Fabian Nicieza's next retcon, which is to show us and reveal to us that there was a love relationship between Kwannon here, which is the Asian-bodied version of Psylocke, and Matsuo Tsurayaba. So that's a little unexpected. And then the scene switches to the X-Mansion, and I find this a little bit amusing. We see Professor X here. He seems to be sleeping very soundly. He's got a smile on his face, and he's got a little photo here framed of Jean and Scott, which I suppose is a little bit sweet because of course he thinks of those two as perhaps his children, really. And it looks like Kwannon is getting ready, or rather Revanche is getting ready to behead Professor X. And that's what Spiral says. Charles Xavier, it would appear, the headmaster is about to become headless. How utterly delightful. What happened to the transmission? It's not possible for it to have stopped unless. So what's going on here? So part 1 of Soul Possessions is the Butterfly and the Hawk. The Butterfly is Matsuo Tsurayaba's pet name for Kwannon, and Tsurayaba himself is the Hawk. And the story chapter is subtitled The Truth About Psylocke, brought to you by Fabian Nicieza, writer, Andy Kubert, penciler, Matt Ryan, inker. And here we've got Lovern Kindersky coming on board with his digital color separating computer, Digital Chameleon. And Lovern Kindersky will be the colorist of the X-Men, of this X-Men title going forward. Bill Oakley, letterer. And I do want to comment on these new computer generated colors, and you can let me know what you think about them in the comment section to the video, because obviously for these flashback scenes, the device is to mute the colors, and even though you know, it's legible and one can see what's going on. I don't love it. And I don't think I liked it at the time, back in 1994 when I first saw this. I liked the computer coloring like we see here on this page, but the flashback choice to mute the colors, I didn't like it, and I would have preferred if the flashbacks had continued to be indicated just by those curved borders, corners of the panels, which was the device going back to the 60s in Marvel Comics for flashbacks. I would have been happy with that. These muted colors, I don't love it, and I wonder if it was a surprise to Kandinsky when he looked at the way the colors reproduced on newsprint. Was he happy with this? Because you don't really see it into the future with the comic. So let's continue with the story then. What's happened here? Why has the feed to Spiral gone offline? Well, it's the next morning and Professor X is awake and he has his head on his shoulders, and he has paid Psylocke a visit to her bedroom, and he tells her, and when I woke up I found that dug into the floor by my bedside. So that's the katana blade, and the note attached to it was all Revanche left as a token of her leave taking. So there's a note there, and Psylocke quotes it: high enough to avoid the problems I face now, to avoid the legacy virus which is rapidly coursing through this mutant body killing me. I will fly far enough away so I will no longer be of any concern to you, Charles Xavier, or your gallant X-Men, who have been nothing if not fair to me since my duplicitous arrival into your home. And that's it. So a very nice image here, and use of the computer coloring on these panels on this particular page. It looks well on this page. And what's going on here is that Professor X says that Revanche masked her entrance into his room psychically and just as surreptitiously left, with no explanation of who she really is. So Psylocke here expresses publicly the problem now for figuring out the exact nature of the shared identity between the pair. And when Professor X leaves, she takes out from underneath her bed a wrapping. And what is it that is inside the wrapping? It's a gift from Revanche, and it's those bionic eyes that were implanted in the original, in Betsy Braddock's original body in New Mutants Annual #2, and they were implanted by Mojo to spy on and send television cast back to Mojo World of whatever was going on with the X-Men. And Psylocke made the decision back at that original point not to tell the X-Men. So this is coming back to her now. She never expected to see these eyes again. And so the narrative captions here make the point: since it is a painful reminder of a legacy she thought long gone, but Psylocke knows she has to trust someone with the truth. That once, long ago, she was the victim of a mad woman's machinations. So that's Spiral. Spiral herself here realizes, of course, the implants were removed from the host body, but where could the blinded Revanche go without her bionic eyes? So where indeed? And then the scene switches to Japan and the home of Matsuo Tsurayaba, and he is looking at a photograph that he took, as it turns out, of Kwannon years ago. And so we get this development of Nicieza's retcon that they were lovers, and there's the possibility that their love might face a challenge because they're both assassins and they might find themselves on opposing sides in respect of their different duties. So Psylocke says to Tsurayaba in the flashback here, our lives are what they are. If I'm called upon to do so, I will kill you. She says to him, you must promise me, Matsuo, that you will honor our love, honor me, and do the same for me. So that's going to get picked up on towards the end of this issue, that promise she exacts from him. Great art on these pages by Andy Kubert. A lot of work on these pages as well. There's no scrimping on backgrounds here with the rendition of the Tokyo nightscape and all the neon lighting. Really a lot of work on these pages from the art team. So let's continue with the issue and see what happens here. So Matsuo makes the promise because he loves her, he says, and then we're back in the present as he crushes the photograph and accuses himself. And what did my word, my stupid honor bring me? Nothing but pain. And then he has a visitor, an unexpected visitor, who picks up this apple and begins to peel the skin from the apple. And then of course there's a third hand that pops into the frame. That's really nicely done by Kubert, where we get to see the peeler's perspective on the apple, and then Matsuo Tsuruyaba's, and then back with the peeler's perspective. It's pretty cool little scene here, the 4 panels. And so this all has to do with a deal he struck with Spiral regarding saving Kwannon and it not having been fulfilled by Spiral. So Spiral says here, I left you all the way I have been for so very long. I left you spinning in circles, destined to pass each other by in this carousel of life, doomed to never hold life or hold love in your hands again. But my game is coming undone, young assassin, she says to him, through acts of nature over which I have no control. And that act of nature is the legacy virus and the fact that it's killing Kwannon, Revanche. So Spiral says to Matsuo, don't lose this final opportunity for love. Don't ruin her life again, as you did last time by ruining her death. Don't give in to temptation again as she drops the apple with one bite taken out of it. So that's symbolic. All right. And then we're back at Xavier's mansion. It's January, February, so the grounds of the mansion are covered in snow. That's nicely rendered. And Psylocke is working out in the danger room, and the combat skill level is lethal. So she is fighting and training in the danger room, no holds barred. And then she's met by, apparently, Angel, his old original self, which takes her by surprise. And Angel says to her, in the flesh, as it were, you wouldn't cut down a little old sparrow like me just to prove you're a hawk, would you? So she smiles and she cuts right through the holographic, the Shi'ar holographic technology. And then who's up in the control room except for Warren Worthington himself? And he invites her to breakfast in town. What do you say we drive into town for, well, brunch at Muncie's? So Psylocke down here says she'll be ready once she shares and changes. And Warren, thank you for caring. So this is part of this developing relationship, friendship, ultimately a romantic relationship between Archangel and Psylocke that goes back to issue 29 of Adjectiveless X-Men. And then the scene switches to Professor X's study, and he's taking tea there with the Beast, who's hanging from the fan on the ceiling. That's a great perspective, top-down perspective on Professor X in his wheelchair. And also another use of the new computer coloring technology where Professor X is kind of muted there, and it means that our focus is on the Beast in the foreground, our foreground from our perspective. So really what the conversation is about here is that Professor X is asking Beast, in the absence of Cyclops, who's on his honeymoon with Jean Grey, to become Blue Team leader. And so Beast is not 100% delighted by that, because really he talks about how he was looking to spend more time fighting the legacy virus. And he even makes the point, shouldn't Sean Cassidy... Also, sorry, Professor X wants Beast to take a hand in maybe being overall in charge of the school at the X Mansion. And Beast makes the point as he drops to the floor, couldn't Sean Cassidy do the latter far better than I could? And Professor X here makes the point as he pulls this file out of his desk drawer. his time will be occupied in ways which I hope will benefit us all for many years to come. So Beast looks at the title on the file, the Xavier Institute, an incorporation of Emma Frost, Massachusetts Academy. So the professor reveals her attorneys have informed me, surprising as it may sound, that she wished the academy turned over to us if she ever became incapacitated. And she has been incapacitated in a coma, mindless apparently, since Uncanny X-Men 281. So Beast is surprised, but now that he sees that Sean is going to be involved in this new institute, which ultimately will be the home of Generation X, he's happy now, or at least willing, to do what Professor X wants him to. And so there we go. Now let's see what goes on in the rest of the issue. So a little scene switch here up to the upper stories of the X-Mansion, and we've got Gambit here leaning on the jamb of Rogue's bedroom door, and he's checking up on her. Why wasn't she down for breakfast? So she's up here catching up on her reading, and she says to him when he's talking to her about the breakfast, she says, "But did you save me any of the chocolatey goop at the bottom? You remember how I love that sugar rush, don't you, Remy?" And this takes him by surprise. "Sorry, sucked it all up," he says. "Girl, everything okay by you?" "I'm fine, Remy, really, why?" "Dunno, Petite, you've been kind of off-center since what went down in New Orleans." So the editorial note here by Bob Harris is to see the Gambit limited series, and what's being referenced here is issue number 3, where Rogue thought about using her powers to absorb the memories of Belladonna Boudreaux, that is Gambit's wife. She ultimately chose not to, but she'd taken off her glove, and then Belladonna, apparently with an involuntary reflex in her unconscious state, touched Rogue's hand, and Rogue then did indeed absorb all of Belladonna's memories, including this. The implication is that it was Belladonna that likes the chocolatey goop at the bottom of a mix of Cocoa Krispies and granola, which is what Gambit had for breakfast. So more to come on that in the next issue. And then we switch back to Matsuo Tsuruyaba's memories when he was on a mission to kill Lord Noirin, who was Kwannon's employer. They fought, and ultimately they were evenly matched, but Kwannon fell off the edge of a cliff into the sea, and she was nearly drowned and brain damaged. She'd swallowed so much seawater and her brain denied oxygen for so short a period of time, she was still severely damaged. So this is what Tsuruyaba did. He put her in the flotation tank and made a deal with Spiral to use Betsy Braddock, who his hand members had found after she emerged from the Siege Perilous, to use her psychic powers to in some way fix the mind of Kwannon, and when that failed, to actually be transplanted into Kwannon's body, and he hoped then to mold the new mind in Kwannon's body, so that she would be who she was before. So, I mean, all of that was vain. And ultimately, Revanche arrives at Matsuo Tsuruyaba's Japanese home. And here she is with the blindfold on, because of course she's taken out those bionic eyes. And she's going to get to the bottom of things in terms of what happened to her. And then we switch back to North America, to Salem Center in Westchester, New York. And I really like this image of Warren with Betsy Psylocke on his arm, and just the details here of the quality shop here, all of that detail here for Salem Center in midwinter, or is it January, February, and yeah, really, really great artwork. Great page by Andy Kubert, Matt Ryan, and Kindersky. Even though these colors look quite flat actually, so he's holding back on the digital coloring on this page, and I think it looks well. That restraint makes for a better looking page, in my view. And so Psylocke decides to confide in Warren about the bionic eyes. And so she says here, perhaps I should have said something, but I was never too proud of owing the luxury of sight to Spiral and her vile body shop. After the X-Men's first disappearance through the Siege Perilous in Dallas and her subsequent cloaking from all forms of electronic scanning, that was thanks to Roman's spell, I honestly assumed that they were no longer functioning. Then when my second encounter with Siege resulted in this new form, well, quite frankly, I never thought to pry my own eyes out to see if they were real or not. Would you have? She asks Archangel, and he says, of course not. But obviously, Revanche felt the need to reject the blasted things. Maybe from a figurative standpoint, she wanted to turn a blind eye to what's happened to her, he says. You know, die in peace without seeing it. Or maybe her actions have greater meaning. And Betsy says, you understand how frustrating this has been, don't you, Warren? After the transformations you underwent at the hands of Apocalypse, you know the other horror of awakening and finding out everything that that was once true about you. Your very face has changed. It is a violation of the highest order, and that is kind of the grounding of their growing intimacy, those shared bodily violations that they have in common. And then the scene switches, and this is an interesting visual device of Kubert's, where Psylocke is holding the eyes in her hand, and then we get that superimposed over a shot of Kwannon. She has the blindfold on there, you can see it at the edges, but it results in this almost macabre, grotesque image of Kwannon with her eyes back, looking out here, really freakily from this page, or this panel, and the overlay of panel on panel. So Kwannon is using her powers to get into Matsuo Tsuruyaba's head and find out the truth of what really happened, and he insists on seeing her in his mind's eye as Kwannon, as Psylocke. Hope this isn't all getting very confusing. And then basically Tsuruyaba decides to tell her the truth, Kwannon, the ugly truth. Is that what you want, my love? All right then. Yes, even though I'd lost your soul, I still had your body whole again. So that's the body in the flotation tank. And let's see. So here's his explanation. He says, at first, I truly thought that the Mandarin and her psi-sensitive had been successful. So for that, look back to my reviews of Uncanny X-Men 256 and 57 and 58 of the Jim Lee, Chris Claremont storyline. And he continues and says, but when I discovered that your minds had been switched, I realized that my plans had been betrayed by another. That's Spiral. Then I decided that having your body could be enough, and that I would sculpt of that what I could of our love, that Psylocke's fractured memories, take Psylocke's fractured memories and try to mold them into a semblance of what you were. So of course, Kwannon, Revanche, is not at all happy with that. She says, is that why you chose not to say anything when Psylocke and I first confronted you months ago? So that was back in issue 23. And he says, I thought it was penance. I owed you an eye for an eye, as it were. So that's Nicieza's explanation for that, and his way of trying to smooth the continuity here. So Kwannon now says, no, I was lost when we attacked you. My memories were not truly my own, but given to me by Noirin's fictitious diary. Truth to tell, it is only of late that I even remembered the truth of my past, of our love, and saw the lies which Noirin had crafted around my resurrection as a means of keeping me from you. So they're kind of almost on a point of reconciliation, but then the fact is that Kwannon, Revanche, is dying of the legacy virus, and her death is near. So she runs from him. It happens now. I can feel death is here. So Matsuo is distraught, but he follows her up to the cliff's edge, and she says to him, you can redeem yourself and our love if you do not fail me this one last time, and that goes back to the promise earlier in the issue, the flashback promise, take my short blade, I have but seconds left, she says. Do not allow me to die because of this cursed virus. I beg of you, do not allow that. So she's begging for euthanasia, mercy killing here. And he doesn't want to, but then he slides the knife in, and the narrative captions reveal his blade cuts cleanly, and the escalating energies building within Revanche's body are released outwards. She was a private person, he thinks. She did not want to die feeling the thoughts of others pressing in on her feverish mind. Instead, with her passing, everyone knows hers, especially one whose life has so intimately touched her. So, half a world away in Westchester, Psylocke feels Kwannon's death, and her psychic scream leads to this car crash, but Warren's okay, Psylocke's okay, and Psylocke realizes that Revanche is gone, and Archangel knows the same as well. And now Psylocke's worried here about how's she going to find out what really happened. The violation to our bodies was done on such a basic genetic level that our sense confused Wolverine. Even the professor couldn't probe our minds to find the answers. Who could have done something like that to us, and why? And here in this anchor image, very cool, is Spiral sitting up on the branches of one of those trees. And she says, the answer to that one, darling Elizabeth, my old friend is more than happy to extend a helping hand, or 6. So next, Spiral's back. She spins a dance of love and hate, but who will turn to face the music? Plus, what or who has gotten into Rogue? Well, if you read the Gambit limited series and issue 3, which I have a review on the channel of, you'll know the answer to that question. So here there's some teasing about the upcoming Generation X new title, and yep, there you go. So I do hope that you enjoyed this review of Uncanny X-Men 31, where Nicieza tries to smooth out and undo the mess he made with his not taking account of that one page in Uncanny X-Men 255 that showed Betsy emerging, well, on the other side of the Siege Perilous in her original British body, and not at all in Japan or anything like that. And once that was pointed out to him, he had to go and deal with it, and this was his means of doing it, retconning the retcon, so to speak. I do hope that you enjoyed this review of X-Men 31. If you did, please like the review in YouTube, and if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.